Reddit is famous for being a lawless corner of the internet. Ancient Athens is remembered as the birthplace of law itself. And yet, strip away the togas and the memes. The two systems work almost identically. Crowds of ordinary people, not experts, deciding what's acceptable. The lawless platform and the lawful civilization solve justice the exact same way. Here's why. And here's the one thing they did completely differently. That changes everything. Picture a neighborhood with no police, no mayor, no one with the authority to just decide who's right and who's wrong. 10,000 people share the same streets and the same disputes, and one of them keeps breaking the rules everyone else follows. Who stops them? Who decides they're actually guilty? And why would anyone accept that verdict from a total stranger? That's the wall every growing community eventually hits. Small groups don't need formal justice. If a group only has 30 people, everyone knows each other, and problems get worked out face to face. But once a community grows past personal trust, that shortcut disappears. Ancient Athens hit this wall as it grew into a crowded city-state. Reddit hit the same wall the moment it grew past a small forum into a platform with over 100,000 active communities. In both cases, the obvious fix seemed dangerous. Handing judgment to one trusted authority sounds efficient, but Athenians had lived through tyranny and refused to rebuild anything close to a throne, even a judicial one. Centralizing power in one company, one algorithm, or one person creates the same fear today. A single point of failure nobody fully trusts to stay fair. So the real challenge was never just punishing wrongdoing. It was building judgment that was fast enough to matter, trusted enough to be accepted, and structured so no single person or group could seize control of it. Athens' answer to this problem sounds almost too simple to have worked. And yet it ran one of the most advanced legal systems of the ancient world, without a single professional judge. Each year, the city selected 6,000 male citizens over the age of 30 from a pool of volunteers. These were the dikastai, the jurors who would serve the city for the entire year. They weren't voted in. They weren't appointed. They were chosen entirely by lottery, using a device called the Kleroterion. The Kleroterion was a tall stone slab carved with rows of narrow slots. Citizens inserted bronze tokens stamped with their names into these slots. A tube attached to the device released small colored balls in a random sequence, and that sequence determined, row by row, exactly which citizens would serve that day. It was a mechanical randomizer built entirely out of stone and bronze, centuries before anyone had a concept of a computer. On any given day, a jury panel could range from around 200 people for a minor case, up to 1,500 or more for a major political trial. These numbers weren't arbitrary. Panels were built large and unpredictable on purpose, specifically so no one could bribe or intimidate a jury they had no way of identifying in advance. There were no professional judges presiding over these trials, no prosecutors, no defense attorneys arguing on someone's behalf. Citizens argued their own cases directly, each given exactly the same amount of speaking time, measured out using a water clock. Wealth and status didn't buy extra minutes. One of the most striking rules involved silence. Jurors were forbidden from discussing the case with each other. There was no deliberation room, no group discussion, no jury foreman guiding anyone toward consensus. Each juror listened to the arguments alone, formed an opinion alone, then walked to an urn and dropped in a small bronze disc to cast a secret vote for guilt or innocence. Whichever side had the majority won. There was no appeal. To make sure this system wasn't limited to citizens who could afford to skip a day of work, jurors received a small daily wage known as the mistos, introduced under the leadership of Pericles. It wasn't much, and in practice, many jurors ended up being older citizens with time available. But the principle behind it mattered. Justice wasn't supposed to be a privilege reserved only for the wealthy. Every part of this system pointed toward the same goal. Random selection made bribery nearly impossible, since no one knew who would be judging them until the day arrived. Large panels made intimidation impractical. The ban on deliberation removed the risk of groupthink or social pressure swaying a verdict. Secret ballots removed the fear of retaliation for an honest vote. Athens didn't build this system because it believed any single person was naturally fair. It built this system because it assumed the opposite, and then engineered a structure where unfairness had almost no room to take hold. 24 centuries later, A very different kind of jury system would reach a strikingly similar solution, without courts, without oaths, and without a single bronze disc. Reddit has no single person reading every post. There's no company employee assigned to personally judge each of its more than 100,000 active communities. So who actually decides what stays online, what gets removed, and who gets banned? The system starts with volunteer moderators. Creating a community on the platform automatically makes a person its first moderator, and as that community grows, the existing moderators bring in more volunteers from within their own ranks. The role comes with no salary and no wage of any kind, only authority and responsibility over how that community runs. It's unpaid work, carried out by people who care enough about a topic to spend their own time managing it. Layered on top of that volunteer structure is something Athens never had access to: a constant, real-time public vote running every second of every day. Every single post and comment carries an upvote and downvote option. Multiplied across millions of users, this turns every person browsing the platform into a small-scale juror, casting quiet verdicts on quality and behavior dozens of times in a single session. Strong contributions rise toward the top. Weak or rule-breaking ones sink out of view, often before a human moderator ever needs to step in. These accumulated votes build into something called karma, a running score attached to every account based on how the community has responded to a person's posts and comments over time. In a rough echo of Athens requiring jurors to be citizens over the age of 30, many communities set minimum karma and account age requirements before a new account is even allowed to post. It's a simple filter, but an effective one, designed to slow down spam accounts, trolls, and bad faith newcomers before they can participate at all. Since no group of volunteers, however dedicated, could possibly read every post manually, the platform also introduced an automated tool called AutoModerator. This system can instantly catch banned words, spam patterns, or obvious rule violations, flagging or removing content before a human ever sees it. It doesn't eliminate the need for human judgment, since moderators still have to review much of what gets flagged. What it does is shrink an impossible workload down into something manageable. Step back and look at the overall shape of this system. Judgment is spread across an enormous number of people rather than concentrated in one authority. It runs cheaply at a massive scale. There's a filter built in to screen out bad actors before they can act, and the entire structure is built specifically to keep functioning without any single all-powerful decision-maker controlling it. Bronze discs and stone slabs have been replaced with browser tabs and vote counts, but the underlying skeleton looks remarkably familiar. Set aside stone slabs and browser tabs for a moment. Every justice system, no matter the century, has to answer the same four questions. Who is allowed to judge? How are they chosen? How does a decision actually get made? And what stops the whole system from being captured by one person or one group? Athens answered it this way. Any citizen over 30 was eligible to judge. Selection happened through random lottery. A verdict came from a simple majority vote across a large panel, reached without any group discussion. And the system resisted capture through randomness, scale, and secrecy. Reddit answers the same four questions differently. Any user is authorized to vote, while a smaller, self-selected group takes on the role of moderator. Voters simply show up and participate, while moderators choose the role voluntarily rather than being selected at random. A decision emerges from a combination of aggregated votes and moderator judgment. And the system resists capture through sheer volume of participation, karma requirements, and automated filtering. Laid out side by side like this, the similarities become hard to miss. Both systems reject the idea of one all-powerful expert making every call, choosing instead to spread judgment across a crowd. Both rely on scale itself as a defense, since a jury too large to bribe and a user base too large for one bad actor to control work on the exact same principle. Both build in distance between the judge and the judged, whether that's Athens' secret ballot or Reddit's pseudonymous accounts, so people can vote honestly without fearing retaliation. And both require some form of eligibility threshold before someone can participate, whether that's citizenship and age in Athens or karma and account age on Reddit. None of this is coincidence. It's an example of convergent institutional design, the same underlying problem producing the same underlying solution, even though the two systems developed thousands of years apart with no connection to one another. But convergence doesn't mean the two systems are identical, and where they diverge matters just as much as where they align. Athens relied on random selection, meaning jurors had no choice in whether they served. That randomness was precisely what made the system resistant to bribery. Reddit does the opposite. Its moderators are entirely self-selected volunteers, chosen by their own interest and passion rather than by chance. That produces moderation teams with real knowledge of their communities, but it also opens the door to groupthink, since a self-selected group often shares the same assumptions and blind spots. Athenian verdicts were permanent. One vote, no appeal, no revisiting the outcome once the ballots were counted. Reddit's verdicts are the opposite of permanent. A downvoted post can recover. A removed comment can be restored. A ban can be reversed. Judgment on the platform isn't a single event. It's a constantly shifting recalculation. And Athens specifically paid its jurors so that poorer citizens wouldn't be excluded from serving. Reddit's moderators receive nothing in return for their labor, which introduces a problem Athens never had to solve: burnout and turnover, since there's no wage waiting for a volunteer exhausted from managing a community of millions for free. Each of these differences reflects what each system valued most. Athens prioritized incorruptibility above everything else. Reddit prioritizes scale and specialized knowledge above everything else, and accepts different weaknesses as the cost of that choice. This raises a deeper question sitting underneath both systems. Why rely on crowds at all, instead of simply finding the single wisest, most impartial person available and letting them decide? The answer is that legitimacy in judgment rarely comes from expertise. It comes from whether the people being judged accept the process as fair in the first place. And the most reliable way to build that acceptance at scale is to make the judges resemble the community itself, rather than an outside authority standing above it. A randomly chosen citizen looks like the people they're judging. A crowd of votes looks like the community's own collective opinion, not a decree handed down from a distant company. Seen this way, the crowd isn't a fallback used only when nothing better is available. It's a deliberate mechanism for generating legitimacy, one that keeps reappearing across history, from Athenian courts to modern jury trials, to Reddit's votes and volunteer moderators. The transferable idea running underneath all of it is this: justice systems don't hold up because they find the smartest possible judge. They hold up because they find a structure the community actually trusts, one spread out enough to resist being seized by any single person, but organized enough to still produce a real decision. Scale on its own doesn't break fairness. Unstructured centralization does. So the next time you see a post get buried by downvotes, or a mod remove a comment, remember, you're watching a 2,400-year-old idea still running, just with different hardware. Athens bet that justice works best when it looks like the crowd it judges, not an elite above it. Reddit made that same bet, whether it knew it or not. So here's what I'm curious about. If you were designing the moderation system for a community you actually cared about, would you trust a random lottery of members, like Athens did? Or a self-selected group of the most passionate volunteers, like Reddit does? Tell me which one you'd choose, and why, down in the comments.